So you might have guessed from the timing of this video that it's supposed to be an April Fool's thing, but I honestly kinda hate pranks, especially pranks from YouTube videos. So I decided that the best prank I could do would be one on myself, which is why this video is going to be an honest to God tale slash video essay about Disco Elysium, that massive hit game from a few years back by those communists who thanked Karl Marx at the Game Awards.
And Marx and Engels for providing us the political education. Thank you.
Now, you might think that every possible story that can be told about Disco Elysium to get across the themes and the narrative and the gameplay that it presented in such an amazing way has already been done. I mean, I'm not the first person to talk about this game, but as the title of the video hopefully tells you, if I've done my clickbaiting correctly, I think I have a unique perspective on Disco Elysium. Specifically, that this game was my kryptonite. I'm a gamer, unashamedly so. I play games most of my free time, and not just easy games either. I finished the Halo series on Legendary when I was but a child. I've played every Dark Souls game, and far more impressively, I've finished the Pathfinder games on the hardest difficulty, which is a challenge because Owlcat designs games that seem to hate the idea of people playing them. No joke. I did the Ereshkigal puzzle legitimately to get Nenio's questline finished, and for anyone who knows what the hell I'm talking about, that's no small feat. And yet, despite that rather impressive resume of playing games that challenge your skill and ability to finish them, I struggled so much with Disco Elysium. Let me set the scene. You wake up after a strange dream involving all these primordial voices and concepts arguing and talking with your insignificant mixture of flaws and messes crumbling around you. You are hungover as all hell, missing most of your clothes, and with no idea what you're supposed to be doing right now. The who you are, well, that's missing too. But maybe if you pick up the right things and interact with the right stuff, then you could plausibly rebuild some semblance of an identity. So before you head out, you grab the stuff scattered around the room, and then you finally spot a tie hanging from a ceiling fan. The tie, a symbol of authority and respect. That's got to be some kind of key. It must play some important part. Otherwise, why would it be there? So you go to grab it, and then you die.
You only see pain and fear.
Wake up in that same black suit from before. Skip through the dialogue because you've seen this one already, and you're back. Eyes open, groggy, dreary, floor, hungover. Go to the ceiling fan. Grab the tie again. Die.
Pain and fear.
Okay, maybe it's a build issue this time. You can mess around with your skills a little bit so that getting this tie is more in the wheelhouse of what you're able to do. Skip through the intro, go to grab the tie again. Die.
And fear.
This happens 6 more times until you finally succeed in getting that fucking tie, and you are now past the first room that you woke up in. Before you've engaged with a single other person, before you've seen anything at all of this world, a fucking tie has already done you in enough that it would be considered a very active serial killer. By this point, the screaming of the vehicle engine at the start when you wake up has become an almost torturous reminder of the fact that you can't seem to get through this bloody game that everyone is raving about. But finally, you've made it through that first gauntlet. You've got your tie now. You rush on out, a new sound occupying your ears, a beautiful little jingly tune. Do 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 do. Do, do. Little do you know how stupid it is to feel happy at that sound. But How could you? How could you see the future stretching out before you that would turn such a joyful moment into a later traumatic trigger? You finally get to do some human interactions, some detective stuff. You get to learn about who your character is, figuring out elements that seem important about who you are, about your role in this game. You're a police officer, ooh, who is really depressed, okay, and a drunk, hooray, and has basically just killed their old self and gets to rebuild who they are through the choices of some puppet master who can't seem to fucking control you well enough to get a goddamn tie in the first try, am I right? Things are going well for you and this puppet master, and then you find a book, a casebook. Your casebook. There is a part of it that you can open, but the game tells you not to do it, not to risk it. However, that just seems like the kind of thing that you want to do in a game. A door with a sign that says "Do not enter" cannot affect me as I am unable to read and there might be treasure behind it. While a door need not have warning written on it to be understood though, it should probably be locked to keep my filthy little curiosity mittens out of it. So you die again.
You feel the ledger slip from your hand.
Your whole psyche collapsing with the weight of emotions behind that door that you can't deal with. And you didn't save for some fucking reason, which means look at that. It's the start and the tie again. On the ceiling fan, 4 more deaths to the tie.
Pain and fear.
Then you die to kicking a door. You die to shooting a child accidentally. You die from a child killing you. You die, and you die, and you die, and sometimes you save scum because at this point it's desperate. But each time you find that whatever build you made just wasn't good enough to get through the game. Just left you wanting to get it right and go back and change your stats around so maybe you can find out all this cool hidden stuff that you're not getting to see because you keep dying to it. And yet, because your stats suck, you're unable to pull that off. Now, to be clear, that story did have a purpose.
But first-hand witnesses claim that the officer was making a point.
That story was my experience with Disco Elysium. I perished over 50 times before the first part of the game was done, and I'm talking the first few hours. Most of them in the first few minutes, and almost all of them before the first hour. It seemed almost like fate, like I was Sideshow Bob walking into all the rakes around me over and over. That little happy tune from the Whirlin' in Rags I mentioned had swiftly transformed into a personal flashback trigger, leaving me like that picture of a hamster who was stuck in Vietnam. And there are so many articles about Disco Elysium which talk up that ceiling fan death, because it's an apparently pretty common one for most people to face. Lots of gaming journalists positing how such an event is part of the tropes of Disco Elysium, that it sells you on the world and gives you the first real taste of what the game wants you to feel, the dystopian nature it is trying to evoke, where even a tie on a ceiling fan is a serious mortal threat to you. Now, I don't know about any of that, frankly, and I don't want to, because every writer and their mum has talked that shit to death. What I do know, however, is that the developers are fucking bastards for what they did. An RPG with no real combat mechanics to speak of is not the one that I expect to find myself bashing my head against the brick wall of my own inability to save/roll well. At this point in an IRL campaign, the DM would presumably have taken pity on me and just fudged some of those rolls. So if I'm not here to talk about the way that this experience ties into some grand meta-narrative or ludo-narrative, how am I essaying this video game? Well, I'm essaying this video game by taking it down the route of the fact that I'm pretty sure I've had the most unique experience of Disco Elysium. I don't think anybody else who experienced this work of art, and it is art, okay, sorry to all the people who don't like to think of video games as that, you're idiots, just get over it. It's a new medium, sure, but it's just as creative and evocative and thought-provoking as any old splashes of dead beetle on flattened plants. I got a unique perspective into the world of Revachol and to the mindset of Detective Harriet de Boy, because unlike all of you who got to play the fucking game and enjoy it as one cohesive storyline, mine was a jagged mess of dozens of different Harriet de Boys who either stopped existing because I forgot to fucking save, or were cast aside into the void because I deemed their build and choices and failure to get the stuff I wanted to get right to be wrong, and ultimately screwing over my chance of making it through the game in a way I was happy with. I saw a version of Disco Elysium that I think seriously impacted the mindset that I went into the rest of the game with. Because I did finally make it through those first few hours with a save that actually lasted the whole game. But the whole time, I was living in fear and paranoia and constant, never-ending concern that I would soon join the legion of forgotten and never-born parallel versions of my Detective Harry. It was almost dystopian. I would take moments during parts of the game that were particularly beautiful just to relax and take it all in. An optional version of that Life is Strange mechanic where they let you chill with some nice music for a bit so you can decompress from the huge guilt trip, trust breaking narrative that Don't Nod are dragging you along in that game. But I knew, no matter how nice things might be at that moment in Disco Elysium, that very soon I was going to be launched right back into another situation where I could feasibly end up right back on that cold floor with no clothes on, reaching for a tie that had killed me 20 times already. When I heard the noon and evening versions of Whirling in Rags, I had visceral and sudden emotional claws latching into me, pulling me into the abyss of playing the first fucking hour of the game over and over. What had happened was that I had hooked into an elaborate torture device, disguised as a game cleverly, and one that was all the worse because I had paid $40 to play it, and by God, I wasn't gonna give up now. Everyone had been talking for weeks and weeks and months about how amazing the story was. It was on track to winning a bunch of awards. I had got to see this through. So despite all of the fear, the anxiety, the panic and pain, I persevered. I made it through the story beats. I pulled off things that had previously been my downfall. And before long, I was on the boat, heading out with Kim at my side to the island that would end the story, that would give me my narrative closure and let me move on. And then the game crashed.
Then it is truly over. You are truly doomed.
And my save had been 3 hours before. But I was not ready to give up here. No way in hell. So I grinded my way back up to that point. This time, I saved before I got onto the boat, and see, I'm learning, and I was back on the waves again. Beautiful music playing, cinematic scene rolling, triumphant pose giving me the same feeling that Harry had. The end was finally in sight. And then the game crashed again. And again. And again. So I verified my files, loaded it up, and the save file was corrupted. The one chance I had to finish things. The one time that actually managed to go somewhere. And right when victory was in my grasp, I realized that in fact I was holding sand. I never did finish Disco Elysium. Even now, years later, I just can't go back and play that game again. It broke my spirit first in those multiple deaths at the beginning, and then it finished me off by breaking my heart at the end. But despite that, I do think that I had an experience of the game that is perhaps the most authentic to a certain kind of feeling it wants to get across. Perhaps the most dystopian and depressing playthrough that anyone has had of that game. And if that is the case, if even to this day the mere visual or audio expression from Disco Elysium is enough to send me crashing back into the person I was when I played it, the quivering mess of a human by the end, to bring back that inexorable tide of emotions that I first felt, maybe then it was worth the $40 I spent. Regardless, it certainly made for a funny story to tell all my friends and acquaintances I meet and have a good laugh at me for. Now, if you don't mind me, there's a tie on a ceiling fan somewhere that I need to go and get down. And while I could avoid it, it's certainly not coming down itself. And despite the risk, someone's got to do it.